Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome. We will start this webinar in a couple of minutes. So thank you for your patience. Good to see you, Glenn. Nice haircut.
He's not listening.
All right, welcome everyone. So thank you for joining us for this webinar today. We're very excited to speak with you about supporting inclusive employment in the surveying space and spatial and hydrographic industry. Before we begin, we'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. So I'm coming to you from the lands of the Eora Nation in southwest Sydney, and I believe that each of us are coming from different locations all around Australia. The First Nations people of Australia, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, have had a long, vibrant and continuous culture for tens of thousands of years, which has, of all the cultures on the planet, had such a strong relationship with the living world around us, the environment, and such a strong connection to country. A really integral part of this, in my understanding, has been a real acknowledgement of the diversity needed to create sustainability, to create long-lasting, complex systems that have vibrant connections that allow us to have resilience in a way that means that we have relationships with the world around us that stands the test of time, that's symbiotic and helps us to really live in connection with every living being and the non-living world in a way that is sustainable. So within the spirit of that, I'm going to hand over to Matt Duckham, one of the SSS-DLN co-conveners, to kick us off.
Thank you very much, Roshni, and thank you for that acknowledgement of country. And I'm also coming to you from Wurundjeri land in sight of the Birrarung here in Melbourne, Naarm. And I think we've got a really interesting discussion coming up. What I'm going to do is just introduce some of our speakers, and then we'll hear a little bit about the Inclusion at Work survey before we really get into the discussion in a bit more detail. And so I'm delighted to welcome first Maree Wilson, Chief of Place and Communication Division at Geoscience Australia, who's got a background in defence and GIS, something very close to my own heart. And I think someone who's really helping drive GA's leadership in the area of diversity and inclusion. So welcome, Maree.
Thanks, Matt.
Next, I've got Quincy Hall, who's, I think, managed to combine two of my favorite things as well, diversity and mapping. So at the Diversity Atlas, and really got that background in, I think, in performance and live performance, if I'm right, Quincy, but really looking at that sort of data-driven platforms for insights into diversity and inclusion. So welcome, Quincy.
Thank you very much. And I'm also coming to you today from unceded Gulidjan land, about 3 hours west of Melbourne in Coldack. And I also represent today, to an extent, Diversity Council of Australia, who couldn't attend today. So I'm their proxy somewhat as well today. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Quincy. Wonderful to have you here. And then we've got Samantha Garbutt online here as well, and our other third speaker today, Chief People Officer for Australian Spatial Analytics, with a background in business and law. But also, I think, very grateful for you for coming along, Samantha, bringing that people perspective from, I think, one of the most innovative and dynamic companies in the spatial sector. So wonderful to have you here, Samantha.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, very much looking forward to this.
Great. Well, we'll hear more from each of our speakers shortly, but what I wanted to do to start off with is to introduce Maree Wilson, who's one of my co-conveners of SSS-DLN, the Spatial and Surveying Diversity Leadership Network, as well as director at Yokogawa and non-executive director at GCA, the Geospatial Council of Australia. Just if you would, Maree, to give us a bit of background to the Inclusion at Work survey and how that's going, because it's live and open now, and if people haven't responded, this is the moment that they can start responding.
It is indeed. I will just share my screen. I will give first a quick update, a snapshot on what 2021 looked like. 2021 was the first year that the spatial and surveying and hydrographic industries participated in the survey. And as you can see from my screen here, we had a little bit over 1,000 respondents. This is the state-by-state breakdown that we received. 22% in New South Wales, 15% in New Zealand, 21% in Victoria. And we had our breakdown monitored across businesses, government and academia. There were a lot of findings that came out of the survey, and these have been very useful, I think, as a result of us understanding more the participation in our industry. Certainly a lot of diversity and inclusion initiatives at different organisations, and through industry itself, policies for particular committees and for boards have started to emerge. But I guess the main thing that we've taken out of the initial survey is that at that point of time, we didn't have a huge amount of representation in the participants from the survey, and the actions that actually need to fall out of us understanding the data and understanding the opportunities for the industry are really what people are most interested in. So, we learned things like, people were 8.5 times less likely to leave a workplace if their employer was engaging in diversity and inclusion initiatives. They felt they were six times more effective in their roles if they had a harmonious environment that was respectful and recognised the value and contribution of their diversity. 5 times more likely to innovate. We did find a few blind spots last time, and so this is really what's driving us to continue this exploration, monitoring the progress of the initiatives that we've undertaken, since this point in time. We had so few Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people respond last time, we actually weren't able to report them as an individual group. You need a minimum level of reporting so that we can share the data on different cohorts. And I think that is our challenge that we face today. Just stop sharing this screen and share a snapshot of the results up until very early hours of this morning. Okay. So just can you confirm you're seeing my screen?
Yes, it's not in presenter view though.
No, I haven't. Sorry, I haven't put it in presenter mode for the purpose of being quick and efficient and not spending too much time. I just thought I'd quickly go through them, but I might skip some of the slides. So as of this morning, we had over 600 participants. I think it was about 647. We are aiming to, well and truly blow 1,000 participants out of the water. That's what we had 3 years ago. We know our industry is about 25,000 people, and that's at the minimum. That's not being 100% inclusive and including everyone that works in the related businesses and, the users and things of our industry. The good thing is what we are seeing at the moment is that, the diversity of participants is showing, that actually probably our industry is more diverse than we thought it was. People are coming from 54 countries of birth, 54 different countries of origin, speaking 55 languages, spread across 45 religions. 58% are male, which is a much better representation than we saw last time. Last time in 2021, it was a lot of the minority groups, so the underrepresented groups that were really responding to our surveys. Seeing more male participants this time is a bonus. 43% of our industry that have responded so far to the survey are born overseas. 18% identify as having some form of disability. 12% identify as LGBTI. 35% as multilingual. 1% as Indigenous, 43% with caring responsibilities, and 90% as working flexibly. I'm expecting to see quite a big change in that flexibility statistics. So going forward, but unfortunately with only 1% of Indigenous people identifying in the survey at the moment, again, our numbers are not going to be sufficient that we can report on that cohort. And we are currently showing as being quite a way behind the national representation in that area. To touch briefly on who's been responding, this is the age spread of our distribution of respondees. About 15% in both the 35 to 39, 40 to 44, and 50 to 54 age groups. Distribution has been, again, quite high over Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales, and getting up there for New Zealand. A little less in some of the other states. So if you know anyone in those states that you could encourage to really sponsor the participation, now is a great time to do that. We have a higher than national average in terms of our support for D&I initiatives in our industry. It's looking at the moment as about nearly 90%, 87% support the initiatives, and 10% are nonplussed whether we undertake these initiatives or not. But it's much higher than the national average. Participants' support for D&I actions still swings quite heavily towards women rather than men from the representation by percentage. And the experience of inclusion is still variable. I mean, whilst many people are experiencing an inclusive environment and say they feel valued and safe at work, unfortunately, we still have a percentage that do not. They either strongly disagree with the support for feeling safe and respected and valued at work, or slightly disagree with that statement. And I guess that's our troublesome area, when people aren't feeling safe and confident to come to work and be themselves. Different responses based on gender. The participant experience of inclusion is still varying. And the mental impact this is having on people is still impacting about 30% in terms of a very negative or a negative impact on their feeling of safety and security to be themselves at work. So I guess on that point, I'm going to pass over to the Q&A panel. What do we need to do to encourage more participation, keep encouraging diversity and inclusion in our workplaces, and yeah, what does good look like?
Thank you so much, Maree. That's a brilliant summary, and I'm guessing most, if not everybody here, has filled in the survey. But if you're watching this on record, now is the moment to hit pause, to go away and fill in the survey, and come back to watch the rest of this, because I think it's great. We've got over 600 already, but we absolutely want to smash that 1,000 barrier as well. So yeah, thanks very much for that, and such important data. It gives us that baseline and allows us to know better what we need to do next. So yeah, what I'm going to do now is just ask each of our panelists, our distinguished panelists, they've been asked to speak a little bit on that topic and their own experiences and expertise in that area. And I might come to you first, Maree, if that's okay. Or do you need to share any slides, or will you just talk?
I do have a couple of little ones, so I will share them. Hopefully,
they look like they're coming through now.
Awesome.
Great. Yeah, we can see them.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much, Maree. Over to you.
Can you not hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear and see fine.
So as Matt said, Maree Wilson, I'm the Chief of Place and Communities Division at Geoscience Australia. I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, so acknowledge their connection to the land that I come to you from today. GA has been on quite an inclusion journey, probably over the last 7 years. We have made a real lot of headway with that, but still a long way to go. So very keen to kind of see some of the survey results from across the industry because we think we're doing a pretty good job. But yeah, always want to continue to do better. Just wanted to quickly, these statistics that I'm just showing now, excuse me, the results from the Australian Public Service Census from last year. This is an excerpt out of our People and Culture strategy, which is available on the internet, and I put the horrible link down the bottom there in case you want to navigate to that, or Google it, either or. Just to talk as to how we are kind of currently tracking in that journey towards inclusivity at GA. Our workforce is roughly 50-50, and actually pulled up the statistics from this year's survey as well. So last year we were 54% male, and we've shifted that to 51% male, 44% female. So we are still continuing to move in a more balanced direction as far as gender in our workplace. We have over now 50% of senior executive positions held by women. We are now at 75, and we actually need to swing that back, maybe the other way a little. Cultural background, again, these are last year's figures, but we do have quite a number of people of culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. Having said that, we are generally predominantly Australian. It is a slight challenge for us in that employees must be Australian citizens, so it does sometimes put some challenges on bringing in cold staff into the workplace. One of the really positive things that GA has been able to do over the past 7 or so years is really look at this flexible workplace and how we can actually change the working environment for the better to make it more inclusive for everybody, dependent on what their outside of work responsibilities are. So 83% of our staff last year accessed flexible working arrangements. So they include opportunities to work from home. They include opportunities to work different hours. So either, kind of between school pickups or flexible hours around caring responsibilities for the young or the elderly. So that's a massively high percent. Of course, before COVID, that was much lower, but it's really been a technology shift that's enabled that through COVID. It hasn't actually been an attitude shift. So, but it's one of the plus sides of COVID, which we talk about, has been that ability to really open that flexibility in the workplace. And, at my level, the ability to demonstrate that. So I have the opportunity to work from home a day a week. I absolutely use flexible work arrangements. I don't do mornings, for example. So I just start a little later and finish a little later, and it's just fine. So being able to demonstrate that in the workplace, and that really opens up those inclusivity conversations. Some of the updated stats, we have 9% of staff now identifying with a disability, 9% identifying as neurodivergent, and 10% identifying as LGBTQIA+. So those numbers are going up, which are great. What we don't know is whether the number of staff has increased or the number of staff who are willing to say that they are has increased. So either way, we're really happy that that statistic is actually on the way up, because we really want to be demonstrating that we are an inclusive workplace. Some of the ways we're demonstrating this is again from our people and culture strategy. There are 5 principles in there, and this is the relevant one, which is around success through diversity. So this is really making sure that we are very front and center in not just saying that we want to be a diverse and inclusive workplace, but we've actually got kind of targets on what success looks like through our monitoring and evaluation. So continued monitoring of this every 3 months to understand how we're tracking and making sure that it remains front of mind as we move through. So that's all I had. I just wanted to quickly just show those stats, but I guess for me and for Geoscience Australia and for the federal government, why do we are we interested in a survey? What's it going to give us? Like, obviously we capture our own statistics, which is great, but it's actually, for me, you know, we have a thin workforce for our future needs. So being that employer of choice, not just in government, but across the whole spatial industry, is just so critical for us to even be an industry that people want to be in. There have been at times, you know, places or careers that people maybe don't embrace because they think that it might be a bit blokey or a bit stereotypical or something like that. Surveyors are aware of that, public service are very aware of that. So the more that we can do to be showing that we are actively working this in our industry, the survey is hugely valuable for us, because we can see the areas that may not even be coming out in my stats that I can work on, that I might be blind to Maree Ellen's point before. So that's why it's really important to us. So I'll stop there. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you so much, Maree. That was a great overview. And yeah, that also jumps out for me from the 2021 Inclusion at Work survey. You know, diverse teams are, you know, 8.5 times less likely to leave their job. People, workers in diverse teams, 7 times more you're likely to be satisfied. So, you know, that really speaks to, you know, when you have that expert workforce, ensuring that you know, there's the value proposition of, for you know, industries like ours to be able to keep the best people and you know, keep them in the area. Thanks very much. Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to questions shortly, but next up I'd like to invite Samantha to give a kind of her perspective as well. Samantha, do you also have slides?
I do, only a few, and one of them is a photo. So I will share that now. And I will just go to presenter mode. Sorry, 1 second. And I did include statistics. I felt this was the right audience. So hi, everyone. I'm the Chief People Officer at Australian Spatial Analytics. Matt alluded to the fact that we're a very innovative and diverse organisation. And I've included this photo specifically because from this photo, you wouldn't necessarily know why. So for the statistics, we have now 140 employees, and over 80% of them are neurodivergent, primarily autistic. And we were set up because our mission is to employ young neurodivergent individuals who have experienced barriers to employment. And the vehicle we use to do that is spatial science, because the work they do is as data analysts, and we do work for medium and large enterprise. So the fact that spatial science has provided this opportunity, because it really matches up well with their strengths of focus, pattern recognition, and attention to detail. And if the industry to an extent wasn't welcoming, we wouldn't have been able to do this. And this growth has occurred in 3 years. So when the last survey, or the first survey in 2021 was released, we didn't actually submit any responses. So that's how much has changed and how much growth we've experienced in just 3 years. But look, 70% of our team are in their first job. So probably contributing a lot to those younger numbers in the demographics. And it's, 61% are long-term unemployed, so haven't been employed for 2 years, and many of them underemployed in their potential, or have just never got through that recruitment process or had the confidence to even apply. And yet here we are, and that growth wouldn't have happened if we weren't having happy customers and therefore the team doing an outstanding job. I've included this slide again. Some of these slides we use when we're talking to industry partners who are not this audience, who are not driven to inclusivity. And this goes to the credibility of 80% of the team being neurodivergent and the projects they work on. We're working with the big partners in town. And why this survey is really important is because to date, our focus has been on our team performing projects for these clients. Our next focus is for our team to transition in employment to these employers. We've had several success stories already, but we've got a real focus now that we've been operating for 3 years strong. These people, they're confident, they're ambitious. You've seen them speaking at GCA events. They want the next step, and it's with these employers who can really provide them technical opportunities and growth opportunities that ASA can't necessarily. So, looking back at the survey results from 2021, as Maree Ellen did, this is what was reported: lowest levels of inclusivity for people with disability. Now, ASA is great, we exist to support them. But the next challenge is, well, they're going into an environment that, is not as welcoming. So what's really key is having champions in those organisations who support people with disabilities, neurodivergency. There's 30% of our team identify with LGBTQIA+, which is huge. So how do we keep promoting the opportunities that come with inclusivity, and also, keep the pedal to the metal on it's something that needs to happen, because with that comes a solution to the skills shortage, because there's a whole untapped workforce of young, ambitious individuals who are skilled. And so there's your future workers, provided we just shift the view, open up the pipeline a little to consider those that maybe we never considered before. 100% the team are responding to that survey because they're informing decisions and perspectives of their future employers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samantha. That's great, and just really amazing to hear how the survey is actually being received and having practical impact. Great, thank you very much. Before we go to a kind of more open questions, we've got Quincy as our third guest and panelist and speaker. Quincy, do you have your slides there as well?
I have a website to show just that I might just touch on at the end. Thank you.
Great.
Just before I go into my 6 reasons why people might not do the survey or might not want to, just want to touch on a couple of things that were said earlier. First, about that cultural safety, about bringing your whole self to work. We're seeing that quite a bit in the data, in that when we ask people, is this an inclusive organisation that I work with, and we will see the numbers at a certain amount. Follow-up question that inquires as to whether they believe it's sufficiently diverse, or words to that effect. That might be nice and high as well. But then that third question, do you feel comfortable bringing your whole self, is always below those first 2. And what that implies is that, and I think it's a general statement in Australia, we are getting better and better every year at the inclusive employment, and becoming sufficiently diverse, which I'll touch on. But it's that next step, which is, okay, now that we've got people from different backgrounds of demographics, social, cultural, and so on, can we leverage it? Can we foster it? Can we make them feel confident in bringing their whole selves to work? So that is largely the next step that I think our industry needs to take. And also, Moritz asked about that sample, the numbers there, and Maree touched on this as well about that 8% LGBT. A couple of things about that. We tend to think that maybe the numbers are inflated on some of these surveys, but there's a message in that. We're under the belief, and this is global with Diversity Atlas as well, that people who are either identify as LGBTQIA+ or live with disability or are from racially marginalized groups are more likely to do a diversity and inclusion survey due to historic marginalization and so on. So it's impossible to tell, but it's our educated guess, but it's a highly educated one, I would like to say. But another one we're looking at internally is that term LGBTQIA+, because we have data showing that when we ask people, you know, are you heterosexual? Yes, no. And there's options of lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, and so on. And then have the follow-up question, do you identify as LGBTQIA+? Around about 20% will say no to that second question, even though they might have been L, G, B, or Q, and so on, which is an interesting piece of data in itself. But getting back to the main topic, sorry, a few things I couldn't help myself on there. I checked just before the webinar, we're on 650, so we did hit that. Well done. But we do want to get up above that 1,070 and beat what we did last time. And at Diversity Atlas, we often talk about taking an anthropological approach. And by that, I mean going out and talking to people as one of the first steps. And probably the first group of people that we really want to be able to get to are the leaders in the organization and in the group. Because when we look at the numbers globally, and you ask a question along the lines of, this company is an inclusive place to work, and a follow-up question, my managers or leaders are inclusive in their behaviors, the numbers are suspiciously similar. Now, when both of those numbers are nice and high, that's great. It shows that the managers and the company are all in, you know, cahoots there, in synchronicity. But if the numbers are low, that's not good. And what it seems to imply, even when the numbers are low, they still seem similar. And what that seems to imply is that the leaders have as much sway over the opinions of the workers and the people as the company does. And the rather blunt example I like to give is an organization might do everything right with its messaging. They'll have a rainbow flag up. They'll sponsor Pride Week. They'll have an ERG. They'll do everything perfect in, say, that space, inclusive language and all of that. But if the person comes to work and their boss is a homophobe, they will judge the entire organization on the person that they report to. And so getting that leadership buy-in is incredibly important. And I urge everybody on here today or listening to the recording to get to the leaders, because they're going to be able to have an influence. Now, there are 5 other reasons I'm going to rush through really quickly why people don't do surveys, diversity and inclusion surveys. I'm not counting survey fatigue as one of them. First off, and it was touched on before about people saying, you know, I'm not diverse enough. Now, we reject that completely. At Diversity Atlas, we often talk about how no one individual is diverse. In fact, we even reject that term called cultural and linguistically diverse in terms of an individual, because every person on the planet is different. Diversity is when you've got 2 people and you start to look at what do they have the same, what do they have different. So 2 people meet, one's a man, one's a woman, one's a Catholic, one's an atheist, and so on. And we start putting metrics to that difference. And that's all that diversity is. And we had one customer that got a lot of kickback about that. People saying, oh, it's not really for me. I'm just a white guy in my 50s, like I am. And they built up a profile of the most common response within that organization. And it was a woman who was 44, who was a Christian, or at least culturally a Christian, and didn't have a disability. And they did a cartoon picture of that woman and ran around saying, if you're not exactly this woman, you're diverse. You should be doing this survey, which I thought was really good messaging. Another one is about fears of privacy. You know, is it truly anonymous? And as the technology provider in this instance, I can assure everybody it is wholly and perfectly and beautifully anonymous, our survey. We don't collect IP addresses or any other personal identifiable information. We can't tell you who's done the survey and who hasn't. It's impossible. We also have all those rules on the dashboard itself. So you need 36 surveys in any group to see results. And then you need at least 10 people to identify as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, or 10 people to have disability to start looking at isolated results. And that's also to protect re-identification. And even when you export the data, it's all vertical. So by that, I mean, you might see, oh, we've got 3 people born in Fiji. Oh, we have 6 people who identified as gay. But how many Fijians are gay? It's impossible to do because it's only vertical aggregation of the raw data. And being able to emphasize that to potential participants is very important. Another thing is that the backlash, let's not, the elephant in the room, there's a political backlash to it, but we also believe that that's somewhat largely manufactured. Globally, what we're seeing is that in response to that question, and you saw the data on your survey there, when asked, do you support D&I? Globally with Diversity Atlas, only 2% actively say no. And I think for the most part in the reality of workplaces around the world, when people are offered some sort of initiative or program that says, we're going to help you get along with one another, they say yes. And I think that's important to emphasize as well, that overall there is support. Then there's a lot of people that say, so what? I don't care if so-and-so is gay or so-and-so is disabled. It doesn't affect our day-to-day business. We're all a happy business and everyone's equal and all of that. Well, we've got data that puts a little bit of that to the side. For instance, one of our questions on Diversity Atlas is what aspects of your social or cultural identity are the most important to you? And we have 20 options. In the Middle East, my religion is quite often number 1, and parts of Africa. In France and Italy, it's my language comes in number 1. In Australia, it's largely my interests and hobbies, fighting away with my country of birth and my ancestry for the top 3. But when you start filtering things, for women, my gender is the 3rd highest priority, but for men, it's 18th. And for people who are heterosexual or straight, my sexuality is 19th. But for people who are not heterosexual, it's second globally, 2nd highest identity priority. So when people say, oh, it doesn't matter, it does. It does matter to a lot of people. Things like their sexuality, their disability, their, or as we say, their interests, hobbies are important to their identity. And that's why it matters, because you need to be able to get a feel for who you have in order to keep that in mind. The last thing that I want to touch on really quickly is about how limited resources us D&I people have within organizations. There's only so much money we have, and we often say at Diversity Atlas, we're competing against concreters, because a lot of organizations might think, okay, we've got to build a wheelchair ramp, or do a diversity and inclusion survey, or sponsor something. There's only limited resources, limited time. But doing surveys like this is going to be able to focus you for the next couple of years. So you might be doing brilliantly on sexuality, going back to that example, and the data will be able to reveal what a good job your organization is doing, because you'll be able to look at the sentiment of people who identified as LGBTQIA+, and say, hey, look, that's right on the mean. That's right on the average of the entire organization. But it's our people with disability, or it's our people from a non-English speaking background, or it's our people from a non-Christian religion. Whatever it is, the data is going to be able to reveal this for you as an organization, and that will be able to give you the focus for the next 2 years of your D&I planning. So that's all I really have to say. I'll probably run out of time there. But if it does come up, I'll be able to show the dashboard and give specific examples later if it comes up in conversation. But thank you.
Really appreciate that, Quincy. And thank you also, Sam and Maree. It's really important for us to understand from people like yourselves who are taking the lead in creating change in the industry and in your organizations, why this work is so important. So I'm going to start off with our first, question of the day, which is, what do you think the value proposition of this survey is for the industry, and how do you think it'll become useful for your organization? I might start off with you, Maree.
Certainly, I think it's the comparison to 2021 is a good start. So, you know, I know we are not alone in trying to move ourselves along a D&I journey to get better. So, trying to understand how we as an industry are actually shifting that dial, I think, is really important. Is what we're doing working? Is it not working? And I think that will be a really great thing to start with. We come together quite well as an industry. We've got great conferences like Locate and various other things where we come together. So I know at the last one we had the session that you were involved in, Rosh, you know, we've got these opportunities. Are they enough? You know, that's, I think, something that the survey results are going to tell us. And I think it will help us as an industry through our bodies, etc., to have a bit of a focus of it, because I suspect that will be not enough, and it will help that conversation as we move forward in how maybe we can do it together, so that, you know, we're a reasonably large organisation, I guess, in the spatial world, so we've got quite a few of those resources, Quincy, that we can put to it, but not everyone does. So, you know, what does that look like? How can I help knowing what's kind of working and what's not in our space, maybe with some smaller companies or various other things, as an industry to actually move that forward. So that's what I think I'm really looking forward to seeing out of this, and having that ongoing conversation about the so what and what are we going to do about it.
Thanks, Maree. I guess I also was hoping, Quincy, that you might be able to share some insights around a question that's come up in the chat off the back of what Maree has shared around how do you think we can leverage some of those reasons not to respond in our final week of promoting the survey?
Yeah, I mean, being aware of them, we've got some blog articles and so on we can point you on, but like I think my opening point about speaking to the leaders, that's where it's going to be your time best spent, I think. But as Maree just touched on too, one of the other so what's, I guess, is also the benchmarking, which I didn't mention, and just emphasizing, you know, here's our chance to be able to benchmark against other organisations in Australia and the Australian workforce. And we saw from last time that your results were really good on that benchmarking. And it's also true to say, I know that as an organisation, you've split yourself into 12 groups. So there's space government, space business, space academia, and so on. So that ability to benchmark within each other is also going to be very important.
Thank you. Sam, so I know that ASA is really living and walking the talk when it comes to both diversity and inclusion. What do you think you would see as what you'd love to see come next? What activities would you love to, and priorities would you love to emerge from the results of the survey?
That's a great question. So look, I think we respect that whilst ASA is on, you know, walking the talk, as you say, a lot of organisations, it's a journey, and it's one where, you know, it's new and change is scary, and there's been change going on at a rapid pace, particularly since COVID. So what we'd like to see is small, meaningful steps being taken. It doesn't have to be all big bang and best practice all at once. And I think the biggest change would be support coming from executive level to rethink recruiting and rethink the pools that we've typically looked in and the way we've recruited. It hasn't changed in so long. You know, there's this focus on qualifications as opposed to what aptitude and attitude do you bring in addition to qualifications and industry experience. And that can open up a lot to, you know, diverse groups and show that we're thinking just beyond pieces of paper or the drawing of who we normally employ. So that in itself, and then what that leads to and the ways we think differently would be a big key, and definitely demonstrate that, you know, businesses are thinking differently.
And I guess I want to open up this question to any of our panelists here today. What would your thoughts be on, you know, really reaching leaders of organizations, people with that positional power, to help them to understand the importance of metrics like this? How can we reach people if maybe they're not quite as along the journey as we are, or, you know, that's particularly in this last week of the survey?
I would say to that, it can be really difficult, and you're not in isolation there. It's every organisation has that same question. We know from the data that leadership buy-in is incredibly important, because those leaders can take the anthropological way of in the staff kitchen, you know, just word of mouth, being able to reach people that way. Hey, I did the survey. What'd you think of it? You know, or just getting the vibe of, you know, what the feeling is in these organizations. But it's something that people struggle with, every organization on the planet. But I think that, you know, like I said, you've got one more week to get another 400. So I think it's just a matter of hitting the ground running in the next 24 hours, and best of luck to you.
Roshni, I would also, just on the back of what Quincy said, you know, like for us, when we're supporting someone for an employment transition, it takes a village, and it takes sometimes just someone tapping them on the shoulder and going, you know what, it means I think you can do this. Similarly with a survey, it's easy for us to go, oh, the survey's open, another one, no one cares about my response. But us going, hey, I see you're a leader of this organization, would love to hear your thoughts. It can separate out that their response matters. So, you know, just even if we all here did one approach to someone in our network, you know, that's potentially 10 more responses.
I don't think I've got much of an answer. Sorry, Rosh.
Go ahead, Maree.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I think the ACT numbers were down quite a bit. So certainly we did reach out to all of the leaders across government. And I guess in our space, it's a little tricky because a lot of our spatial people, quite a lot of them identify as spatial second, because they have some other, like an environmental career or something like that. So I wonder too whether it's not completely resonating with them. So I guess my takeaway is that to make maybe another approach, and even if people have considered themselves also spatial, that this is actually really important for them to complete.
And what have you found to be, you know, I guess for each of you, as you've been talking to people in the industry about diversity and inclusion, what have you found to be the things that do resonate with people when you have conversations about these issues? Maybe Sam, we'll start with you.
That's an interesting question. I wonder if I'm from ASA, and when I tell them what we do and how represented we are, they feel they have to give me a certain response. But look, I think ultimately people know something needs to be done, but people struggle to know how, and it seems like a lot of change. So, you know, I think sharing small ways and anecdotes of how change has occurred elsewhere, or what you've done or someone else that they align with in hobbies and interests, because that's important for Australia, have done, that can be key, because we're still at that point, in my opinion, that, you know, it's taking a few very, leaders, very concerted efforts until we get that snowball effect of more change. This is how it was when we introduced more women into industries. And now when we're looking at broader diversity, we're still at that point until that snowball effect happens.
I think I would add to that also, with part of the messaging about diversity as a concept anyway, that the first port of call is representation, external and internal. So you look at a country like Australia, and I know you're looking at that in the data, but people saying I'm not diverse and so on, but, you know, we know that roughly 2.5% of Australia are Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, or 2.8, or around about 3%. And so a very big organisation, it would make sense that ideally those numbers should be around about 3%, depending on what industry and your spread and so on. And just thinking of diversity in that terms has been, you can always take the word away and just say, hey, we're examining our representation. How well do we represent the community that we serve?
And I think that's a great, a great way of thinking of it. Yeah, I totally agree. And I picked up on several of those points that I think resonated very well with me. I really like, Samantha, that idea of the small, meaningful steps, and some of those activities around rethinking recruiting. I mean, I think that, I totally agree. There's a massive impact to be had on that, on the diversity in our organisations, where through directions like that. I also just wanted to ask perhaps about that inclusion angle as well. Quincy, you highlighted that, I think, in your introduction, because I think some of the discussion we've been having so far is very much about, being able to have a diverse workforce. But is there also value of this data when looking at let's say, an already diverse workforce, or a workforce that's becoming more diverse, to help us become more inclusive in that workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the benefits of this tool is that intersectionality, the ability to do multifactorial analysis, because you might say, hey, look at our figures, aren't we great? 90% of our team agree that it's inclusive and great, but who are those 10%? And is there a pattern? Is there an opportunity there when we start drilling down into the data? And so obviously, the more surveys we get in, the better. So we'll be able to, bring some quality into that quantity as such. So yes, I mean, as I touched on at the start, that cultural safety thing is the next step for Australia. I mean, we've always got to take steps with everything. We want representation. And then even within an organisation, it's important to look at representation. A live example, we had one customer, I think 6% of their staff were born in India. And we could see that their sentiment level was low. And it was possibly because they were all in the IT department of this organisation, and they had no representation in HR, and they had no representation in senior leadership. And so it could have been because these people born in India are looking around saying, well, no one in HR understands my cultural background. I'm never getting promoted. And they're going to be able to, they'll lose that talent if something's not done there. And so being able to interrogate those sorts of things within the platform is very important and beneficial for you.
Great, thank you. Samantha, Maree, was that a question you wanted to weigh in on as well?
It's a great one because, beyond seeing people that represent diversity or difference, inclusion's a big one. And I've even written down that the point Quincy said about understanding the diversity of your organization so that you can focus your DEI planning and action. For us, yes, 80% neurodivergent, but we now interrogate that further to what percentage is women, what percent identifies LGBTQIA+. And I mean, then a small change that can come from that is if you have, for instance, a high representation neurodivergent, any event, have an activity, because it gives people something to focus on and connect with, as opposed to just, as per Australian culture, sit around and have a drink. That's great too, but have a mix. So it can really focus different efforts.
Great advice, thanks. Maree, over to you.
Yeah, it's actually Quincy's point before quite resonated with me, that I don't care if you're gay, have a disability. So it's the language piece, I think, for inclusivity for us. There are people that completely embrace the diversity piece, but they don't use the language to make it really inclusive. So that the I don't care statements, in the past, I had to change my own language because I caught myself at times going, I don't care. Well, actually, it's not true. I do care. I completely care. I just don't, what is it? I don't mind. I don't, what am I trying to say here? So I think that the language piece is the hard bit. And to Quincy's other point about the leadership, that's where it's got to come from. If we're not being the ones embodying that, we cannot expect that to be changed as a ground up thing. It has to also come from the top. So I think the language piece on inclusivity is incredibly important. I can hit people over the head with all the strategies and the plans that I like, but unless we actually get some of those kind of tangible shifts in behaviour, it makes it really hard.
Thank you so much. And I notice we're pretty much at time. what I think I'll do now is actually close this with thanks. But we do also have Quincy's ready to show the diversity atlas. So after we've closed, we might actually keep you on if you've got a few moments, Quincy, in case anybody else wants to stay for that. I know I do. But all that remains for me is to say thank you very much to my co-chair Roshni and Maree for organising, but particularly to Maree and Samantha and Quincy for a really super discussion. And I think this will be something that really has helped shape how we think about this, not just this last week, but what comes next as well, in actually making this survey really impactful. Thank you all very much to everyone for coming along. And as I say, please stay on if you want to see a little demo afterwards from Quincy.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the presenters. Good presentation. See you.
Thanks, John.
Quincy, we would love to see your demo.
So what I'm showing, I'll go quick just so you get a feel for what you'll be able to see. You can see that jumping up and down?
Yes, we can.
So this isn't actually Diversity Atlas itself. The way that it works internally, we have another product called Diversity Atlas, and the Diversity Council of Australia loved it so much, they said, could we use your technology, please, but with our questions? So that's what the Inclusive Employer project is, but it's on our platform. And a lot of the, not just the design, but a lot of the metrics in the background are all very similar. So this isn't your results, because I have no access to your results at this stage. It's only when we get into the reporting phase. But what Stella has access to is this dashboard. And on this first page, it's just some broad overview data, but it's down here, I'll go really quickly, that we see here the topics of the DCA survey across their 56 questions. It follows this kind of narrative flow, 4 sections around inclusion, then exclusion, awareness support, the 3 WGEA questions, if you're going for the employer of note citation, team effectiveness and well-being. And the way that we visualize the results is that it all comes in live. So 61 in this test account have done the survey. And if somebody hit enter now, to jump up to 62. And there's your results. You've already seen some of the screenshots there that Mary Ellen had. That's the index that you're compared to for the sake of certification and also for your own internal interrogations. And then there's all the other DCA members as well. And currently that's last year's DCA members, but that will be updated once we get all the data in for this year. And look, it's really nice to have all that instant benchmarking. And there's a fair bit of data. And if you like data, you'll love our dashboard because it's not, as you probably know, having done the survey, it's not just have you personally experienced harassment, yes or no, it's why. And so there's a lot of data to go through for you to benchmark against the index and the DCA members. But also keep in mind that you've split your organization into 12 groups as well. So there's 1,800 points of data, even with no groups. And then you're going to have like 12 more sets of that data for all the comparison. Now, when it comes to the intersectionality on this one, it's single tier. And by that, I mean, you can do the intersectional analysis by any of these descriptions over here, but you can't do them with each other. So if we go to disability, what we're looking at here is question 1 again. I'm treated as a valued and respected team member, and you'll be able to see how people with disability answer that question versus people without disability, and so on across the, 40 plus questions. But you can't do, for instance, we've got gender obviously in there, but you can't do women with disability and so on. It doesn't jump in that deep for the intersectional analysis on this particular platform. And so that's how it all looks. Almost all of it's exportable, as I said, but it's vertical reports. So the re-identification is still at play. And we've also got the rule of 10 over here. So if I click on age, We can see here that back on that question 1 about being a valued and respected team member, we've got our young people, our middle-aged people, and older. There wasn't 10, so it's not showing any data. And that's going to be true of all of these descriptors over here. You need to hit 10 in order to be able to isolate the results. So hopefully you'll be able to get that. I mean, you definitely will be, I'm pretty sure, on your main group. But as for the individual groups, it might be a bit difficult, but good luck.
So far, we only have 4 respondees identifying as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. So we're not going to get that sort of data from them. Yeah. There's a number of categories. I think we will struggle, but anyway, we'll see how we go. Thanks, Quincy.
No, thank you for having me today.
Thank you for letting us record too. So
Yeah. Thank you, and thanks for those. I really like those, as Maritz was saying in the chat as well. I really like your framework for thinking about it with the 6 reasons people don't respond. So,
yeah, what I'll do is I'll make get it out of my messy handwriting and just do a quick little recap.
That'll be awesome.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks,
Should we all look for your LinkedIn post there, Quincy, then?
Yeah. Might actually have to get active on LinkedIn. Thank you,
You might.
everyone.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. See ya.
Bye.
Thanks so much.